Hello and welcome to this new episode of Innovation Roundtable Online Live. Today's event, it will be actually a virtual lab and a continuation of our virtual summit we had earlier this month. In particular, it will be a follow-up to the presentation of Mark Randall, former Chief Strategist and VP Creativity at Adobe, about the Kickbox methodology he created at Adobe and is now like an open source toolbox used by different type of organization all over the world. And during today's event, we will start first with playing the presentation that Mark gave a few weeks ago at our virtual summit. And then at 5 o'clock European time, Mark will be live together with Dave Hengartner from rready, and they will guide us through the digital version of Kickbox, so what you can use to develop intrapreneurship programs completely remotely. It will be an interactive session featuring some presentations, some group discussion, some dynamic interactive exercise, so we're really looking forward for that. And of course, at the end of it, there will also be ample time for Q&As, which we invite you to post in the Q&A section you can find on the right, both during the presentation now and also during the live session. And at the end of it, of course, there will be time also for some informal networking. So without further ado, now we're going to start by watching the presentation by Mark Randall, and we will be back in a little less than half an hour for the interactive lab.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Randall, and I am the Executive Director of the Kickbox Foundation, and I'm here to share with you today a little bit about Kickbox, which you may have heard of because a lot of people are talking about it, and everybody is waving around these red boxes, and you may have seen that. And the big question is, what is the red box? Why is everybody so interested in it? And how can it help you solve your innovation problems? So first of all, it's open source, and that is one reason why people are really excited about it, because it's completely free. So it is a system that you can adopt, and lots of other companies have, thousands and thousands of major multinationals, startups, and not just in technology, but companies all over the place, including heavy equipment manufacturing, consumer packaged goods, media, banking and finance, all sorts of interesting areas, even nonprofits like United Nations, the Gates Foundation, and even governments and militaries are using it. And one of the things I love is that a lot of schools are using it, and all the way down to elementary schools, where we are testing a new thing called Kickbox. But it is widely taught in universities. And so everybody's excited about it, but what is it? Well, the interesting thing about the box is you can share, and you can share it physically, an actual box, which can look like this, and I'll hold that up so you can see it. And you know, there's also a really cool book which you can download at kickbox.org, and you can download all the box materials at kickbox.org. You just go, you sign up, you get the download link right away, and you can then see Kickbox and start deploying it. And the neat thing is that here we're going to be releasing at Innovation Roundtable the first version of the purely electronic Kickbox, which we will be showing you in an upcoming session. So, and walking you through how to use it and giving you links to all of the materials. So what is interesting about Kickbox is that when you deploy it to employees in your organization, you give it with some amount of resources. It was developed at Adobe. I was head of strategy at Adobe and VP of creativity at Adobe. And I got the task of creating this innovation program and examining everything that Adobe had done in the past. I decided, those things weren't really working for us, so we needed to do something dramatically different. And people had already done all the things that kind of made sense to do. So I realized we would have to do something unconventional. And so we experimented and eventually came up with Kickbox. It became enormously successful inside Adobe starting at 2012. And in 2015, we open sourced it, letting everybody use it. And then when I retired from Adobe a couple years ago, Adobe very nicely contributed the open source IP to a nonprofit foundation formed by the community of organizations around Kickbox using it globally, of which there are tens of thousands. And that is what led to Kickbox. And the interesting thing about it is the really strange way that it works. You give people some resources to develop an idea and pitch it back to the company. And it's an idea you haven't heard yet, and they may not have even had yet. So you're not filtering the ideas. And we recommend that you don't filter the people. It basically, at Adobe, any employee could get a red box with no questions asked. They would come to a workshop for 2 days. We would train them on how to use the tools that are in the red box, and then they would guide themselves through a process using the red box and 6 different levels. And inside the box, it came with everything they needed, including sugar and caffeine and complete directions, including start here. And then these 6 levels would guide them through this process, and they could be self-guided, although we would, of course, provide mentoring and inspiration and things like that. And as they progressed through the levels, they would then reach the final level in the red box, which is level 6, and that is the infiltrate level. And when they would conquer the box, when they would graduate from level 6 by passing the milestone, they would get a fabulous prize. And everybody always wants to know what happens if you beat the red box. Well, that fabulous prize is a blue box. What's in the blue box? No one knows. Well, at least nobody at Adobe knew, but you can now get copies of red boxes and blue boxes used at organizations all over the world. Modify and adapt it as you please for your process, because it will work with any process that you are already doing. And it's not to replace what you're already doing. It's at Adobe, we already had our research labs, we already had our product groups, we even had entrepreneurs in residence, and we didn't stop doing any of those things when we introduced Kickbox. Kickbox was this extra layer to catch the innovation we weren't tapping, and also to spark the innovation we didn't know how to ask for. And now that case studies have been done at Harvard Business School and other places about Kickbox, that's one of the big things people say about it is it gives you innovation you don't know how to ask for. And the interesting thing is it was the least expensive innovation program we did at Adobe. In fact, it was almost a rounding error compared to the others because it's so inexpensive and so low overhead. We had across our 20,000 person organization, literally one person full-time dedicated, me part-time dedicated to Kickbox, and a couple of contractors that helped us. And that was the entire Kickbox innovation organization deploying it and supporting it worldwide. So it's very lightweight, very inexpensive. Some radical things, open to all employees, they can do any idea. And you're going to give them some initial funding, not infinite funding, not a green light to ship, but enough funding to actually test their idea and will really articulate the idea to an actual potential customer and then get real world data. So they're not coming back with a theoretical PowerPoint deck pitch, although it can be in PowerPoint. They're coming back with real concrete customer data. And as we teach in Kickbox, if you want to win an argument with your CEO, well, CEO is going to win, bring data. And so we bring actual customer data. So this is what the 6-level process that I described walks them through. And there is a bunch of stuff in the box, and all of this is stuff that is downloadable that you can print and make your own versions, including things like scorecards, canvas, checklists that help guide people through this process. And of course, the Kickbook that you can download. The cool thing is that you can also even hire contractors and consultants out there have practices around deploying Kickbox for organizations, so you don't even need to do it yourself. Although at Adobe, we developed and did it ourselves, and lots of organizations have developed and done it themselves. And the wonderful thing is when you get to level 6, we teach people to stop playing this game called Hippo, highest paid person's opinion. And the way you get around is that you bring that data to the table of an actual customer who is actually excited, really wants to do this. And so we teach the qualitative and the quantitative for people to be able to go through this process. So a typical Kickbox pitch will be just 10 minutes long, but they will have actually engaged with 100, 200 customers and polled people and interviewed customers, shown them a prototype, sometimes just a paper prototype, sometimes a mock-up, a 3D mock-up. And the neat thing is that we actually give people resources so that they can themselves, and I'll show you some examples here. Hopefully you can see my camera now. And I'm going to open up a box, and this is actually a box from Swisscom. Oops, let me just, here we go, grab what I want out of this. It's this box I want. So this is an example of the downloadable, Kick map that you can do. And this box happens to be in German. And so you can see lots of cool ideas. Now, some people say, I really can't afford to go out and give $1,000 cash, which is what Adobe did. We put a credit card in the box, $1,000. And so other organizations have come up with really cool ways to deal with that if they don't want to have people just expensing things or giving them cash money. So this is actually a token chip for a day of prototyping. This is a card that'll get them a half hour of legal help and advice. And so you can arrange with either internal or external vendors, and then you can create your budget, which could include, actual money and also resources based on your kind of org. Like here's prototyping. Some people have done giving designers or even industrial engineering people to render a mock-up. But really, with just a small amount of money and a clear path, people are able to develop their own concept and then pitch it. And the beautiful thing about that is executives engage, and it has worked like gangbusters. So new businesses and new technologies were developed at Adobe and now by lots of other organizations. And shipped to the world that would not have been discovered and would not have existed. And many of them came from people in non-traditional roles. And so at Adobe, every year when it would come to budget time, and I went through my presentation, which was mostly about the other projects that I was doing, and my sort of Kickbox work came at the end. And I never got to present those slides because the CEO would always say, oh, this is Kickbox? Yeah, you're good. Just let us know how much money you need. And it was, because they saw the evidence constantly, and they saw the engagement in employees being lit up, and they really credit it with changing the culture across the company, because it was putting the words of saying innovation is important, it was putting it into action by saying innovation is everybody's job. So when you have an idea, we believe in you, and we want to give you tools so that you could go and realize your idea. It doesn't mean we're going to do it, but we at least want to hear it, and we value what you might come up with, so we're going to show you how to do that. And that really activated employees and got them engaged, because it put trust into action, and that created enormous engagement with our employees. And so if you're interested in what this sounds like, and you'd like to explore more, I invite you to come to kickbox.org. We have an active Slack group, and we're happy to answer questions there and walk you through the process. You can talk to lots of other kinds of orgs. You can talk to other educators. We also do free online webinars and occasional Build-A-Box sessions. And so, but it's all nonprofit. You know, we're happy to take donations, but everything is free. There's no cost. And, you know, you can hear about vendors and other people that can help you implement Kickbox as well. We don't endorse any particularly, but we're happy to do that. And so I wanted to leave time at the end, because there are always a lot of questions from people, you know, starting with, no way, just let anybody do any idea. That can't possibly, well, that might work at Adobe or all these other organizations. That won't work in my organization. And that's generally where everybody starts, but it works. And I always tell people, go try other things first. You know, if they're skeptical, like, well, I don't think we could do that. That sounds weird. And I say, well, try other things. If they work, great. If they don't work, come back. And people come back. And, or usually the people that start with Kickbox are kind of at the point where they've tried other things and nothing has worked. And I tell them, well, this is the least weird thing that works. But it's a little weird, but people are willing to walk you through it and to help you. And now a lot of people have already gone down this path, convincing their orgs that this crazy new thing actually works great. So I'm happy to take questions now. I'm not sure how we do that, but I assume we're gonna, some people are gonna raise some hands, or it will come into the chat.
So I'll be, thanks for your presentation, Mark. I'll actually be helping you with the Q&A right here. And we have a question from Colin McQueen. Colin asks, can Kickbox work in a B2B world? Are ideators empowered to pitch to existing customer companies?
Are ideators allowed to pick a customer company? Is that like a customer to engage with? Yes. And part of the Kickbox process, and this is in level 4, is different methods of how you engage with a customer. And not just, you can start with surveys, and you could start with kind of one-on-one getting feedback. And we teach people how to do that, because that is the entrepreneurial process. So remember, you know, my background, I joined Adobe when they bought my startup, one of my third startup. And so before that, I had been a serial entrepreneur, never worked for anyone my whole life, building companies. Some became quite successful. And then Adobe bought my company and basically asked me, teach our employees how to do what you've been doing your whole life. And that is kind of the startup methodology. You go out, talk to customers, figure out the need, start with a hypothesis, test it scientifically. So it involves a lot of lean style prototyping and testing, which can happen very rapidly. It depends on your kind of customer as to which customers they work with. If you have enterprise customers, like some businesses that Adobe is in, you know, those businesses sell to TV networks. In fact, this is one of the big Kickbox successes, was that ended up becoming the thing that got that Emmy award, because it's only sold to television networks. It was TV everywhere, the technology they use for streaming authentication. There's only 100 customers in the world for this, so it's not the kind of thing you go on and do Facebook surveys. There's only 100 customers, but they're huge media companies. So how do you do that? And in that case, they go, and the important thing is that you have real customer engagement. And in that case, we, you know, the Emmy was jointly awarded because the first customer I talked to was CNN, and they were incredibly interested. And the Emmy was jointly awarded to CNN and Adobe for developing this, because they became the pilot customer. And then they actually helped us sell the first other 6 major media companies. literally their CTO on the road helping us sell it to his competitors, because everybody needs to adopt it for it to be a good business, and that's how important this was to them. So finding that motivated customer is key. Next question.
All right, so we have here a question from Rohan Tonagi from Adani Green Energy Limited. Rohan says, hi, amazing way to promote the innovation. Would Kickbox work in renewable B2G energy company?
B to what?
B2G.
I'm not even.
I assume to government?
Oh, to government. Sure, absolutely. And so the kind of customer doesn't really matter because I didn't design Kickbox for this initially, but it is flexible and adaptable. And immediately at Adobe, people, my focus was always kind of external customer facing. People at Adobe immediately started adapting it for internal process improvement projects and other things I never imagined it for, which is part of the beauty of the fact that I didn't try to judge the ideas and have them do it. Because if I was judging them, I would have said that doesn't fit the innovation model. And we came up with a bunch of things that were huge cost savings and optimizations and customer improvements for Adobe from our sales team and other people you wouldn't have normally involved in an innovation process. And it turns out they can be very innovative. So in the case of government, we have lots of government agencies that have used it, and it's just, in many ways, in my experience, like another enterprise sale. You identify a set of early adopting customers that are interested, that have the problem and are interested in that innovator needs to find them, or their project's not going to get funded and extended through the blue box and raise funds from executives to do this because they don't have the customer engagement. What makes Kickbox projects so successful at getting funding and support internally from CEOs, boards, and executives is they have real early partial customer engagement. And they've gone and just relentlessly focused on getting actual proof and data that customers will do this, because that is the only guarantee. Having opinions from an executive judging committee, even opinions from salespeople, is only a proxy for actual customer demand. So Kickbox says, go straight to the customer. And I always say when people are pitching an idea at Adobe, and it's theoretical, just in a deck, I said, bring me the head of one live customer that has this problem and wants to buy your product if it exists. Let's start there. One. And that is actually an amazing thing, because now you have a real live, living, breathing human in front of you with a problem who can tell you, I will buy this, I will not buy this, I'll only buy it if it's this, this, and this. And so you're now immediately engaged in this round trip process, and suddenly your innovators and it lights them up because it becomes this virtuous cycle going up. And that's why entrepreneurship is so fun to do. Because you're working together with people to solve their problems. What gets better than that?
That's so cool. We have another question from Paul Conan, Medtronic. Can Kickbox also be used for internal improvements, i.e. the customers are internal employees?
Right, yeah, I just mentioned that. And we had some major process improvements at Adobe, but one of my favorite stories about Kickbox, I will share two with you guys. One is that somebody came to Kickbox, and one of the sayings that's part of sort of the Kickbox ethos is, you are the CEO of your idea, but at least it's only for the first $1,000 or whatever that resource, for the Redbox resource commitment is. But until they exhaust those resources they are given, they are the CEO, they choose. And people say, so you're not going to pick our idea? I'm like, no, you choose your idea, you choose how to spend your resources, and people now take responsibility because they're in control. Well, somebody went and did that. And I would tell people in the first workshops, like, I can't stop you for the first $1,000 for the Redbox, even if I hate your idea, so don't even tell me, it doesn't matter, because just do your idea and pitch it. I could be wrong. If you get a real customer, they're right, and I'm wrong. My opinion would be wrong then. And so, because I'm not going to buy your product, but a real customer will. So a guy called me up and he said, look, I don't even think this is, probably fits in Kickbox. He had this idea that he thought that Adobe could do really well if we brought in mindfulness and meditation into the organization. And I was like, well, that seems like a neat idea. Not my thing, but I think, I'll set you up to talk to HR about it. I don't really think it's a Kickbox thing. And after I had that conversation with him, he took me at my word in the workshop, completely ignored my input, spent his money on doing that, went and pitched it to a vice president at Adobe, got it funded, and it became one of the most successful internal programs at Adobe that brought meditation and mindfulness to 60 locations around the world. It was a huge feature article in Forbes about Adobe being the first company to do that at scale, and I was just wrong. So good thing I didn't have the power to stop him. I released that power. And so that is, what is amazing about this. My other story about sort of, internal process is that I did the first prototype workshop with 60 people. And about a year later, I followed up with those people, and when they would call and ask questions or whatever, and about a year later, we were continuing to do Kickbox stuff, and somebody passed me in a hallway at Adobe and said, hey, congratulations. And I said, on what? And they said, on Adobe Know-How. You heard about Know-How? And I'm like, oh yeah, I saw the press release, super cool product. And they said, that's a Kickbox project. I was like, I've never heard of it. And so I looked up, it was out of our group in India, and I was like, I don't think I've done Kickbox. I haven't been to India yet. They want me to go. I haven't done it there yet. How could a team out of India have already shipped something based on Kickbox? So I call up the guy midnight, my time, and I'm like, hello, Akshay, do I know you? And he said, yes, Mark, I was in your first workshop. I happened to be in the US. I snuck in. I wasn't supposed to be there. I got one of the 60 boxes, and we did this. It's so great. Everything you said worked. I was like, you were supposed to get mentoring and call me with questions, Akshay? And he's like, everything worked like you said. Exactly. How to manipulate my senior vice president. And you have to remember, his boss and his senior vice president had never heard of Kickbox. It was secret in the first prototypes. So no one on his side of the planet had ever heard of Kickbox. One guy goes back with a box, enlists 3 other people, and without even telling the executives they were doing it, they ship a commercial, high-earning product, an award-winning product for Adobe that I didn't know about. The innovation group didn't even know about. From one workshop, one box, first time. So does it work? Yeah, that was when I knew, shit, this works.
That's amazing.
Next question.
That's amazing. All right, so we are running out of time soon, but we have another question here from Ripudaman Singh. So Ripudaman says, I think you gamified the ideation to engage employees. Has it been useful in opening the leadership mindset as well?
Oh, yeah. In fact, this was an early problem that we had to solve because we were teaching employees how to pitch, and they were doing it really well. And so by gathering evidence, their pitches were super compelling. They were literally stealing money from other internal projects that were already funded, like people's pet projects, because they were just better. And so they were more compelling. And so one of the challenges, though, is eventually I started having vice presidents and senior vice presidents. They were funded almost too many. Like I was looking like, look, it's not that this idea is crazy or unique. It's actually not even well formed yet. But the pitches were so good. And so I realized, oh my God, we taught the employees how to pitch their ideas, but we didn't teach executives how to catch. And so we started doing sessions where I would just spend an hour or two, like at our executive training offsites, I would come in and I would actually bring a couple of Kickbox teams to pitch. And because Kickbox is all about, let's do this for real, instead of saying, I'm going to tell you in theory how to, work better with entrepreneurs that come to pitch you. And actually, mostly I wanted to toughen them up to be a tougher audience and not, say yes and be so happy quite so quick, because they were so excited to have real data, real engagement, real motion so fast. that I was like, well, hold on, you need to set a higher bar here. You should kick the crap out of these little ideas and make them survive. And so, but the interesting thing was people were really excited. And so I had to convince them not to do that. And the way to do that, I realized with executives, I brought 2 teams in with real ideas and told them, go raise money. And they would go. And I said, I told the executives, at the end of this, there's going to be a pitch to all 30 of you, like 30 vice presidents in a room. And both teams are going to pitch. And then you guys, I'm going to go around one by one and ask which one you are going to fund right now with some money, a couple $1,000s, something. Come on, you've got the money kicking around in a budget somewhere. I want you to fund it. Or justify to all of us why you're not. Well, that turns out to be all the training we needed to do. And those teams raised a bunch of money, and other people said, well, no, I'm not. And then debates happen. They're like, I don't believe in this. I say, well, why not? Look at the evidence. And okay, now they're engaged in the thought process instead of just petting cute ideas on the head and saying, no, you need $5,000. I'll give you $5,000. You're cute. It's like, I don't want our ideas to be some kind of short bus for handicapped kids. Like these ideas can be amazing and they can withstand brutal treatment. They don't need to be, like so many innovation teams, we love our idea that to protect them. And I'm like, no, try to kill them. And the ones you can't kill are the ones that should survive and get money. If they don't scare you, it's not a good idea. If they don't scare you, like some of them, I thought they were going to come from my budget. They were so compelling. And so when you're worried about that, then you found a real idea. And innovation teams I talk to that don't understand that, I'm like, oh, that's because you've never seen a real on-fire idea before. They're rare.
Very cool. That's super fascinating, actually, and also inspiring just hearing all of these stories. And I especially like that story when you said there's a guy that snuck in and took a kickbox, and then somehow, there's a super successful kickbox out there. All right, well, that was our time for this, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing about Kickbox. I think a lot of our attendees got very inspired by this. And actually, let me just mention, we will be rescheduling Mark's lab for the Kickbox shortly, and we'll share some information soon with the attendees. For those that are that I'm sure have been very interested in finding out more and learning more.
Yeah, in a few weeks, you'll be able to, we'll walk you through the first digital Kickbox that you can actually do on screen with your employees from anywhere, so you can stay on your island and run innovation still if you want, and I'll be delighted to do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Welcome back to the studio. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. And we saw already there has been quite a few questions asked in the Q&A. So if you have more, feel free to keep posting them in the Q&A, and Mark and Dave will pick them up later after the lab. So I would like to call on stage Mark Randall, which, as we said, he's the Executive Director of the Kickbox Foundation and formerly Chief Strategist and VP Creativity at Adobe. And together with him, there is also Dave Hengartner, which is the co-founder and CEO of rready. Dave and Mark are here with us. Welcome on stage.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Perfect. All good. It seems that the camera is working. You can share your screen when you're ready, and the stage is yours. I'll leave it to you to this part, and then we will connect later when we move into the breakouts.
So welcome to the session of Unboxing Remote Innovation, where we basically will have a very interactive session. We dive into different topics around Kickbox. We will discuss them. You will discuss them in your roundtables, share your thoughts, and share them back to the plenary as well. And we also touch on the topic on remote innovation, about how to run Kickbox if you have no way of being in the office, and how you can still run the program.
Yep, thanks. And welcome, everybody. I was previously on video. Here I am live. Since then, I've had a terrible cold that I'm still getting over, and Dave's going to help me struggle my way through this. So I'm sorry if I don't sound quite as clear as before. But we have some exciting things to show you, and also a cool new release, because Kickbox is open source. which means that all of the materials are freely available, part of the open source Kickbox system. And this is why so many companies around the world are using it. And we have a new addition, which is pretty cool, to add to the open source today, which is being contributed by the former team from Swisscom, former innovation team, who just spun out, congratulations, Dave, into a company now focused on Kickbox and innovation in general called rready, and that is with 2 R's. And so the neat thing that they are going to be releasing today that we're going to review with you, because you'll be able to use it, is an online board that you can use to kick off a remote innovation session without having to be in person. Previously, Kickbox has always been in person. And then we're also going to have some challenges in terms of today, you guys are going to do breakouts and solve some of the key problems that are a part of getting into Kickbox. And so before you can adopt Kickbox in your organization, you need to answer questions. And these are critical. But before we get into sort of the 3 big questions that you need to answer, and we're going to have 3 breakouts to go with these 3 big questions, and you'll be able to discuss the dynamics, because not every organization answers them the same way, but they're key. And some of you in the Q&A have already been posting, so thank you. And we're going to actually address some of these on the way, which is perfect. But before we get into that, I wanted to quickly share with you guys. One thing is, even when we found with COVID and all of the changes, is even if you're going to get into a remote Kickbox where you have people who are working on another continent potentially, it's still good. I know there's great temptation to not have any physical materials, but we have found from doing things both ways, we found at Adobe and other organizations have found, and here I have an example, by the way, not of an Adobe box, just happen to have a Swisscom box here. And having these materials like the book and these you can download this, you can send it as a PDF, sure, and that's great. And that can help people get through the process, get excited, get motivated. And this one happens to be in German. But, there's things like, a pair of Kick socks, so that, you can come up with cool ideas. They have light bulbs on them that will blow people's socks off. And then, Dave, if you want to maybe screen share here, I'm going to switch my camera back to my full view. All right, there we go. Can you screen share, Dave? Oh, you are. Okay, go ahead. You can advance then. Yeah. And we could take a look at our first set of questions. And Dave, did you have anything to start with?
No, I think the first topic I want to tap in is really around this remote topic. I think when 1.5 years ago, when COVID hit, and we had basically were working in kind of workshops with personally in innovation labs, also shipping physical boxes, running personal demo days, it was a big challenge. So we had to go fully remote and change the whole journey of Kickbox into a new remote setup. And I think I would like to share as well here some of the things we learned along the way and things we have changed while doing Kickbox fully remote. And also here, as Mark mentioned before, happy to also share with you a Miro board we have developed that helps coaches to fully guide a Kickbox virtually. And it's basically, we still try to keep the physical component. I believe strongly that the physical box has a big value. It's kind of a big symbol. Either you have it at home on your home office desk, you have it in the office. It's a daily reminder that you should get things done and get started. And still the physical book is a very powerful tool to take notes and scribbles. So I think it's still important to keep the physical component, but we added this digital part to make it fully remotely possible. We also added some coaching components like some remote coaching. So instead of meeting all in innovation labs, in workshops, it's all done fully remote. So we have a one-on-one coaching kind of sparring relationship where the Kickboxers then see a coach on a monthly basis very quickly, do a check-in, and get some guidance along the process, and also learn. Basically, coach is rather asking the right questions, less of doing the work for the kickboxer. And I think all these things, running them remotely, helped us to be more scalable and more efficient as a program as well.
So Dave, having coaches, I think there is some confusion when people do that. And what we found at Adobe, very experimental when we started, was that a lot of innovators did have questions. And, just to learn my customer and their problem set, I gave them my mobile phone number and said, just call me, in every Kickbox workshop. And if you have questions, so that way I would know. And the coaching that I ended up doing was mostly really just a little bit of process stuff, like, oh, how do I do this? But a lot of just basic entrepreneurial, so then I just ask, how do I determine that a customer really values X? And then we, it's very easy to walk them through and point them to the right resources. So a lot of times it's more traffic cop. Is that what you found?
Yeah, fully agree. It's really rather asking the right question, so the entrepreneur, the kickboxer, figures it out himself. I think that's a good coach at the end. Basically, if you want to make people learn, they have to do the mistakes themselves. They have to go through the rocky road of validating the idea. And one of the biggest mistakes we have done was overcoaching. At the very early days, you basically almost were driving the ideas behind the scenes. So some kickboxers were successful more because of the coach behind the scenes, and at the later stage they failed or were even replaced with a better person to implement the project. But that was a big learning. The leaner and the more subtle the coaching, the better. And that's why we really ended up in a half an hour to max 45-minute check-ins, where you just ask questions and you really trigger the kind of the motivation of the kickboxer and make him kind of also work and challenge his idea.
Well, remember, to create a successful innovation program inside your company, it's really about long-term fostering a culture of innovation. And the way you do that is by building innovation as a skill. So people always start with, how do I get more innovations? And the answer is go upstream and start working on innovators. So get innovators. And the whole idea of the Red Box was to give them a first failed project. They weren't supposed to succeed. And the fact that a few of them did was completely surprising. But it was so inexpensive, it got them in motion, gave them confidence. They started learning. They're just like a kid learning to ride a bike. They're going to fall, skin their knee. But if it doesn't end up wasting millions of dollars and huge amounts of corporate resources, then that is totally a win, because we're now educating them. So Dave, let's jump into our first, the set of questions they need to answer.
Yeah, 1 second, I reshare the presentation.
So first off, and this was a big thing at Adobe, and something that I really sorted through in creating the first Kickbox, was who can get a Kickbox. And one of the premises of Kickbox was I had looked at, Adobe had done 30 years of innovation programs in the past. Some had been kind of successful, some had been not successful at all. None have been super successful. And so, targeting innovation specifically was something clearly extremely difficult. I knew we'd have to do something that was not obvious. That really smart people before me had tried and failed, therefore probably wasn't them. It was probably, this is really hard. And maybe the correct answer, if there is one, is counterintuitive. So I was approaching it with everything on the table, try everything, and particularly maybe unusual things that you wouldn't try. And so I tried not to gate anything, to limit anything to start with. I just thought, we'll open it up and make it completely open. And if that becomes a problem, we'll fix it. And so who can get a Kickbox? Absolutely anyone that gets a paycheck from the company. And, it can be an administrative assistant. It could be the receptionist. It can be a janitor. It could be, literally invited everybody. Now, it turns out that despite the fact that we invited everybody, it was mostly traditional product roles that were coming to the workshops, because I also put in that it's an all volunteer effort. And the one rule that I had about Kickbox is your manager cannot assign you to come. Because if you're not ready to come or you don't want to learn this, then we're all wasting our time. I'll be wasting my time trying to explain it to you and get you involved, and you'll be wasting your time, trying to learn it or not wanting to learn it, pretending to learn it, and pretending to do it. So I went with the most radical, by the way. If you ever want to know, what did Mark do? Mark started with the most radical version of whatever the question is on the table, the craziest version. And then I always figure I'll back off from there. And so who can get a Kickbox? I started with absolutely everybody. Now, some orgs cannot do that. I actually question that. I think a lot of orgs absolutely can do that, but they choose not to because they just don't really question that assumption. Because first of all, if it's a volunteer system, they have to want to be there. And that turned out probably to be one of the most successful things, is they could come when they were ready to do it. And so my answer is everyone, but there are other answers. And I have seen orgs be successful with doing, limiting it to more traditional product management, engineering, inventor, entrepreneurial in residence type roles. But that's not really the purpose of Kickbox. Kickbox is, it's so inexpensive that you can cast it like 1,000 seeds to the wind and let your plants take root wherever they are, because you're trying to find that Steve Jobs lurking. A lot of people don't know Steve Jobs was a frustrated, not very good product manager at Atari Corporation before he quit and started Apple with Steve Wozniak. So, and he probably sucked as an employee. He probably sucked to manage. And so my hypothesis is that, and this has been borne out to be true, is the absolute best Kickbox innovators in your organization, once you have deployed thousands of boxes over many years, will come from the top 10% of your employees and the bottom 10%, and mostly not from the in-between, although some will. But there's a strange concentration at those who were probably most likely to be promoted and those who are most likely to be fired soon. And that's exactly what I expected, because some of those people really, at the bottom really do suck and are maybe being managed out. But one of them is Steve Jobs, who's just frustrated and about to quit, and suddenly he gets a box, and this is an opportunity you capture and convert that energy. So you don't filter the boxes because you don't know, and it's so cheap you can afford to throw them away. Relatively, sending a box to somebody doesn't cost much money. Including them in a program doesn't cost much money. So, question, who can get it? My answer, anyone? Dave?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that's something also, since ever, I think we have quite a strong opinion on giving everybody the chance, not exclude people, not exclude hierarchies. Actually, we actually did some experiments with corporate talents. We thought these are the perfect innovators, which didn't work out. There might be good leaders. If they do Kickbox, they transform leadership-wise and enable their employees to launch projects. Well, you realize, for example, we assumed corporate talents are great innovators, which was not true. So how can you know? There's so many hidden talent in the corporation, and we have seen at Swisscom of like 500-600 projects. So many successful ones just emerged from somewhere in the organizations, and many of the really good ones were super young apprentices between 16 to 18 years. They really rocked, build new apps for Swisscom TV for millennials. We had people 60-year-old, we had call center agents from all areas, and nobody could project where we have one of these champions hidden. So I think you should really give everybody a chance. And it's also a great transformational tool. 9 out of 10 red boxes will not survive, but everybody will learn a lot. And I think that's one of the big beauties. And you want to have a workforce that's trained, that learns, that knows how to work in a new environment. So I think you should really involve everyone. And on the second question, should you accept just good ideas? I really believe you should accept all ideas, also quite radical, but I think at the end, nobody knows which one will turn out to be a good idea. Nobody. If you look at startup funding, no angel knows which startup will be successful. If you have 100 horses, 100 ideas starting in a corporate, you don't know which will be the one that's successful. Nobody knows. That's why.
Right. So typically in corporations in the past, we haven't had this idea of kind of angel level startup funding. And that's what Kickbox does. It's so small that you can cast, angel investors will write a check the first meeting. They'll have lunch, and by the end of lunch, they will invest in this startup, but they're only investing a small amount compared to a venture capital Series A. And so this is the same idea. And so the decision processes themselves are really heavy. And so if you just start, it turns out this is a beautiful way to get more people involved in the innovation in the org and actually find those mysterious people that are I believe there's 20 across Adobe, 20,000 plus employees worldwide. Any given month, there's about 12 people who are at the right place, the right time, see an opportunity and could do it. And next month, it'll be a different 12. And my job is to make sure that by the time they're that person that month, they understand the box and they know what to do with it. And so many of the most successful projects were second red boxes. The first one failed as expected. And, but the other thing is, which are the good ideas? And so, I did the calculation, and literally to have a meeting with a senior director or a vice president at Adobe and their various staff and hangers-on and scheduling and rescheduling that always happened, it costs about, to have an hour meeting to hear a pitch of an idea, it costs about $1,200 and something, and sometimes more, just in salary time, like not even counting lost opportunity. And so my argument, and it actually, the math pans out, is counterintuitively, it's cheaper to just say yes to all the ideas at the first phase. We're starting at a really wide funnel, take them all in and have an immediate cut, and they cut themselves. So that's the beautiful thing. People try an idea, it doesn't work, and they cancel it themselves, and you never have to hear it. And that is beautiful because they're canceling it not because of their own insecurities, but based on real data. So which are the good ideas? Hell, I don't know. There's been a lot that I would not have funded. And thank goodness, there's a lot of times I've said, thank goodness I didn't, put myself in charge of picking, because initially my boss said, you pick, Mark, you're a serial entrepreneur. You have decades of experience. Who's better? And I'm like, yeah, I'm probably pretty good. But even I know from losing my own money, I passed on Twitter, which my wife will never let me forget. I'm like, then I just don't get it. 160 characters, don't think it's going to work. So I was wrong. So Dave, you have an example.
Exactly. One example, yeah, I think it's one example I really like. We had in the early days that I would have never funded, never would have spent a single franc or dollar on that idea. It was an intern who approached us and got his Kickbox to build a wash machine tracker. He lived in a shared flat in Switzerland. Usually the wash machine sits in the cellar, so he had to walk up and down, do some sport by walking up and down to figure out the washing machine is not ready. And so he wanted to build a sensor that helps him to know when the laundry is done. Stupid idea. Who would fund something like this in Swisscom, which is a telco ICT company? But we couldn't reject, because he said yes to all ideas. So he got this 1,000 francs. He built the sensor, and he came back after 2 months with a working sensor that could measure vibration, temperature, light, everything could potentially measure. And he actually got the IoT team interested. They were building this LoRa technology, this IoT network, and they were super excited. And they gave him money for the blue box. So he built in this LoRa technology in his wash machine tracker and realized, probably not the big market, but there's an even bigger market in maybe a different space. So he validated tracking kids, babies, tracking pets, and ultimately tracking offices. And that's what he did. He pivoted, and now the same sensor that was designed to track the wash machine is now tracking offices at Nestle, Roche, and many other large organizations. And it's just skyrocketing now during COVID. And that's an idea we would have never funded as an innovation team. And a funny side note, he was the biggest driver of traffic to the Swisscom LoRa technology network at one point. So we had the most awesome use case from something we would have never funded. And that's
so ThingDust, the company ThingDust, or the product, is out of an early Kickbox.
Yeah, it was just this wash machine tracker idea. He tried to solve his own problem, and along the way realized there is a business with the same sensor. If he tracks office space, he can create efficiency, and that he actually went to a road show with Swisscom team. The Swisscom team got like 10 business cards. He got like 300 from every single big kind of real estate company, and that was the moment he made the jump and quit Swisscom and founded his own company.
Right. So hearing these ideas at the very earliest phase, because having done startups so many years, I know that the initial idea constantly changes, and evolves based on market feedback. And so that's what is a massive change so it makes it almost impossible. It's like trying to pick your Olympic team, looking at babies in a crib in the hospital when they're just born, they're newborns, and there's no way to pick your team. Or that's good way to pick an Olympic team. And so it's just way too early. So let them develop at low cost a little bit, and then you can judge them better and try to just keep them. I mean, it's not even worth you looking at. I didn't even want to hear the Kickbox ideas. Everybody's all excited to talk about their idea. And, even me listening to the ideas was always just to help their pitch be better. Not, is it good, but just, is it clear? Does it make the case? And so, because I gave up trying to figure out if they're good, because I would have guessed wrong too many times. So that's, we've given you our thoughts, but other organizations have said, no, we won't accept, somebody at the first Kickbox workshop asked, well, we're Adobe software information technology company. Can we do a flying robot toy? And I was like, it says anything, that's anything. So, yep. And it turns out, I think psychologically saying that actually has a benefit, because it gets people to think out of the box a little bit. Now, it turns out they self-edit. There's a couple people maybe crazy enough to do a flying robot toy, and you lose whatever initial resources. But I'm not even sure you lose it, because even some of those things were kind of neat. But no, they didn't go anywhere. But that's okay, because they had a failed project that ended up putting this innovator in motion, and some of those had second red box projects that were very successful. And
we have many of the serial kickboxers who actually, one guy just succeeded in the third or fourth kickbox now. I keep coming back, and like actually now Ready is my third startup now. I think also first startup was a complete failure. Second one was okay. Now hopefully third attempt will be more successful. It's like a skill you learn. It's intrapreneurship, very much like entrepreneurship. I believe Kickbox is kind of this school of intrapreneurship that you do and you learn and you fail, and eventually you succeed.
Yep. And so let's jump to the first question. So you guys are going to drop into breakouts, and then you'll go to a table, 3 or 4 to a table. And we want you to answer these 2 questions. Who can get a Kickbox? Which ideas will you accept? We have a hard limit, 5 minutes, and then you'll be brought back, and then we're going to ask some of you for input. Do it.
I will quickly show you for a moment in the slide how it's going to look in a moment from now. So this is what you're going to see. There is several tables, and as you can double click table and you will be able to join. So make sure first thing that your camera and microphone is on, so also the other attendees can see that you are active and ready to start the discussion. We recommend being maximum 3 to 4 per group, especially you will see people active. They have a little camera, little microphone icon on their avatar. And yes, as Mark said, it's like very quick, it's 5 minutes. So please keep your intro as short as possible and delve into the questions straight away, as there will be also more later. So with that, we're just going to move into the breakouts. And then after you've been discussing the first question, we'll bring you back on the plenary to continue with the lab.
All right, we are back. So I hope the breakout was helpful, and that you guys were able to kind of come to some answers. And I would like to hear from anybody, either in text, voice, or voice and video, preferably, who can share if you are not at the point on that first question where, hey, we can let it open to anyone. My organization, we just can't do that. And so we'll need some way to narrow it down. And so if anyone sort of arrived at that, if you want to raise your hand, and also if anyone arrived at, which may be more common, no, we just can't have anybody, take any idea. Like, we just are not going to do flying robot toys. We're a software company, which was Adobe, would have been Adobe's position until I just said, oh, hell, let's just try it. And turned out nothing bad happened. And it was actually kind of opened people's minds a little bit, and made them really believe, I think it was a great way of putting trust into action and signaling that we believe in innovation. And it's like, look, if it's not a fit, we'll let you decide as the innovator. And people love being treated like adults, turns out. And so, and they'll respond like adults often when you treat them like adults. And if that is the case, if somebody has a question specifically on these two topics that we just did, you could jump in with that question and we'll answer it quickly. And so just raise your hand, look for the raised hand at the bottom of the screen. And so
there was actually one question in that field from Rose Chen. If you want to come to stage, I can read it to you. Rose asked, what criteria do you use as a filter to determine the priorities of ideas and successfully lead to a go-to-market strategy / product? That's a bit that direction. So how do you decide which idea will go forward?
Yeah, so that we're going to deal with in our third section, like sort of how do you pick the winning idea? And that's going to be our subject of our kind of third. So this is the first. So I'm wondering if we should not jump to that just in the interest of time and stay really focused on the, so I'm looking in the Q&A, and so I think there's a couple here that I will take really quickly, and then we're going to jump into the next key decision you need to make in order to implement a Kickbox-like program inside any organization that will be unique to your org. So based on your experience, how much time do Kickboxers invest on average to develop an idea? So obviously different industries and different skill sets are going to vary. But one thing with innovation is it is always, there's more thought time than sometimes doing time. And then innovation is really not necessarily just about engineering. It is also about figuring out demand and talking to customers and figuring out what should we build. At Adobe, we could build any software anyone actually wants, no doubt. Like, it might be hard, might take a long time, but we could do it. And so then the question, too often when we fail, it's because we expended scarce company resources chasing after an idea people didn't want enough. So we got false signals, we followed bad trails. We thought it sounded like a good idea, but it wasn't. And then the product ends up not succeeding or meeting expectations in the market. And that's what we would, we'd like to do bold, innovative new things. But the scary thing is if it's not obvious, maybe it's going to have a higher likelihood of failing. Turns out didn't have a higher likelihood of failing. But how long do they spend? It's at Adobe, I started by guessing that the typical red box, like do your first prototype trial, bad idea that probably won't go anywhere, just to try it out, was, so pick a toy idea and play with it and develop it and learn how to get feedback from a customer. And I gave them 6 to 8 weeks, like making it approximate. And that was only to have a short enough time frame to actually keep them focused. That was part of it, was psychologically, because if they ended up, some of them were, hey, I'm at 8 weeks, I need more. You would say, great, you can have more. But that was also this next part of this question, and then I'll get right to you, Peter, is freeing up time from pressing daily business. And so there are two different approaches there. One is that you get assigned time from heads of business units, approved, and then the other approach, which I did, was you negotiate with your manager, because different teams are different, and you make sure it's not going to impact some critical business goal and screw up your manager's, metrics. But that's part of being an innovator. So I was a serial innovator in a big corporation before I ran innovation, and I didn't get permission. And so I went and looked at those that were people who weren't in an innovation role, who didn't get permission, didn't get time. And it turns out they were able to succeed and make a new project, like Adobe Lightroom was not assigned. The person wasn't given time to do it, but they managed to get time. They showed their boss what they were doing. Their team got excited. People covered for them. And that negotiating is actually part of building the innovator muscle that you need to build in your organization. So that was my philosophy. And it turns out that worked okay at Adobe, because believe it or not, no matter how efficient you think your org is, there's lots of slop.
Maybe one thing to add before moving on to Peter, that's the approach, the tactic we are using. It's like a card in the box. Mm-hmm. It's the working hour card enabled by your manager, and it's a letter to the manager, a negotiation base signed by head of HR. So head of HR is giving this little tool to employees that they have a base for negotiation with their boss to get some time freed up for Kickbox.
Okay. And maybe one thing that you mentioned, it's important for the innovator to get a connection to the market and to the customers. And interesting enough, from my experience, especially in engineering, or sometimes actually in innovation departments, they are quite far away from customers, from market, because they are not in sales or service. So how does Kickbox support that, to really find a link to a specific customer?
Yep. And, it's an interesting philosophical thing. So I think there's a belief now in most companies that we need to be more customer focused. Even people that are removed from the customer need to see customers, be exposed. A lot of companies do the thing where everybody in the company does a rotation for some days a year onto phone support and listens in and buddies with somebody in the phone support, hearing customer problems, hearing customer life. At Adobe, this was incredibly valuable in terms of creating awareness and culture. And so in that same vein, what we do with Kickbox is, if the person is an engineer is like, well, how do I talk to a customer? I literally have people raise their hand, like, how do I talk to a customer? And I'm like, well, do you have friends? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, same way. And so there are obviously lots of processes for doing customer interviews and everything. And Adobe had traditional, very rigid ones that were like kabuki theater, orchestrated customer meetings and everything. And, that Emmy back there was one for a project where we got together with a major customer, CNN, and their executives and our executives, each on other, it looked like North Korea and South Korea meeting, and all formal. And then after it was over, I said, hey, who wants to go to dinner? And nobody from Adobe went, and I went with the CTO and a couple of his direct reports from CNN. And I just asked my favorite question, which is, what's the biggest problem, smart people in your industry see that other people don't? That's on the horizon. Mm-hmm. And the answer to that question that we wrote out ended up being a napkin design that became the product that won a joint Emmy for CNN and Adobe for creating TV everywhere, which enables a lot of the streaming technology that you use today. So, get people to go and just, doesn't have to be a super formal process, but what happened at Adobe was I had people call and say, I'm an engineer, I don't know anybody, and I would just call someone I knew in sales and make a connection. So that's one good thing to do as a senior executive, is hopefully lots of people, and it's a good reason to get a senior executive involved, because that's what your mentor does, is like, okay, let me go find someone. And it turns out, like, while salespeople are justifiably very protective of people wasting their customers' time, salespeople quickly saw customers love being involved in a new blue sky, crazy ass idea. We'd always start the meeting, may never ship, probably won't happen, but if we could do anything, wouldn't this be cool? or not. And then they'd say, neat idea, but no, it wouldn't be cool. Or, oh my God, definitely need that, but more to the left, and suddenly, and customers, even if it was a miss, as long as you were respectful of their time, I had salespeople eventually calling me saying, hey, I'm going to go meet with a customer, and maybe they were late delivering something. I don't know, like, yeah, one of those cool things. They love that,
Great.
And also, sometimes it's difficult to remake people talk to customers. Something was a lot of struggle. That just didn't happen. We tried a lot of ways to somehow enable it, like really having physical testing zones in shops, or like even in the Zurich main station, in the big hall, a big testing lab, so they could go and test their prototypes. Now with COVID, we actually came up with this idea. It's a startup called Testing Time. So they basically connect you to free customers, and you can run customer interviews. There's no excuse anymore. I couldn't find any customers. You just use that technology, and then you have in your calendar free interviews. And all these things, I think you try to make it as easy as possible and remove the excuses people can make. Because what you don't want to do, just run a type form. That's just not enough, not deep enough validation, in my opinion.
Right. You could do surveys, but I always, when we talk about in the Kickbox workshop, I go through, you could do surveys, you do Facebook surveys, you could do online polling, SurveyMonkey, there's a whole bunch. And there's two different categories: qualitative, which is like actual interviews, which you can do online with remote. There's even usertesting.com, where you can pay, $50 and you get connected with 3 people from some broad, I need 3 homemakers or whatever. And you can show them something, record the session. Or, a lot of times what we did is put up a website, put some Google search terms toward the website, and push 100 people to the website. And at Adobe, some of our innovators are very clever. They literally put up like, have 5 minutes to talk on the phone, I'll give you a $20 Amazon gift card right now. And they literally put up that page. When somebody clicked, they were interested in the value prop on the first page. So it was a 2 site. First page, interested. They go to this page and it says, I'll give you $20 right now, had like today's time and date. And then they got 5 interviews in an hour, and then switched the page to one, thank you, put in your email. And they literally did 5 phone interviews. So don't overthink it. Like, yes, I realize some products have an enterprise sale. You're selling airliners, you only have a limited number of customers. But in those cases, you actually already know who they are, and you have a sales team. Like in the case of TV networks, we have somebody who calls on CNN. So that is basically how you do it. So Peter, great question. We're going to jump to
just one point. Mark just mentioned this smoke testing, that you run to this website and you put adverts towards that page. You just put in the chat a video we produced for our innovators to learn how to do that. Very hands-on, step-by-step video that will really show the tactic Mark just mentioned. Really hands-on, that everybody can do it. So there's no excuse. I'm not a website developer. It's very easy to do.
Perfect. Thanks.
Cool. But let's move on. Sorry.
The first time at one of the early Kickbox workshops, there was some guy sitting in the back of the room, and he had his laptop open. I kind of frown on that. He's like typing, leaning back in his chair against the back wall. And, it turns out he was actually putting up his test web page during the workshop. Like, he hadn't even got out of the workshop. And so, if you actually have developers, then you get all kinds of crazy things. But the interesting thing is we also saw people partner. So at a lot of the workshops, it'd say, who's the tech, who's not, and the tech people want marketing, sales oriented, or just general, like, understand the customer and the problem people. And so then getting designers, technologists in the mix in the room. And some companies have tried to sort of do it like a dinner party, where they actually orchestrate that, which I don't think is a bad idea. I'm not sure it's necessary, because good innovators will find the resources they need somehow. I always did, begging, borrowing a favor, inside the company, usually off the books. Nobody knew about it. All right, so we should move on. We're late.
We'll move on to share Windows. Thanks, Peter, very much. Awesome.
Thank you, Peter.
Here's now our second topic of today about, at the end, you need some resource to get and it's very powerful to have some resource at hand. And many people never had resource or budget before. So the question is how much resource you want to give your innovators for such a very early stage idea, and in which form you want to give that resource. To have market, Adobe was basically having prepaid credit cards in the boxes. You could just put money in the box, as you see here.
Right. Adobe essentially had prepaid credit cards. I initially just wanted to put $100 bills in the box because I thought, well, that's the minimum friction. As weird as it would certainly have a lot of impact. But that ended up not being so practical, as somebody, could come in and steal all the money, I guess, with a gun. So maybe decided that wasn't such a great idea, and to gather that. And so instead of actual cash, we did these prepaid debit cards that work like a credit card. And it's not even a credit card where it's paid later. It's literally prepaid. There's $1,000 on it, and it stops once. And so it's called a declining balance. I had to learn about this. It's called a declining balance credit card. You can get them. It's not, like the first thing they try to offer you when you get a credit card. But a company can get them and prepay them and load them. And the beautiful thing is you get basically a credit card statement on what was spent. So you and we use that as a metric to measure momentum. If people were spending, they were doing stuff. And we looked at the statements, and in almost all cases, the money that was spent, despite me reassuring people over and over, no auditing, no, we're not going to ask for receipts. You don't have to do it. Zero friction. So yes, you could just steal the money. And, we just point blank said it. I said, but please don't, because then I'll get fired and, there will be no Kickbox. And nobody did. And so, I guess rule 1, don't hire idiots. And, kind of worked out. But some people like the United Nations or 3M Corporation or other companies, Cisco, couldn't quite go, and also Swisscom. And so I'm showing Swisscom's examples here with a different version, which is to give people allocated resources. But this is like a half hour of legal time to talk to a lawyer about, what's legal, an hour of prototyping time. So creating kind of a token economy. And the lovely thing is when people redeem these, one, you can negotiate a good price somewhere. This is a day pass for some kind of workshop place, a hacker lab or something. And then this is like for having customer meetings with coffee, like Starbucks gift card. This is a prototyping place that will do rapid prototyping. So for those of you that are in hardware, and a lot of times a picture will do. So remember, they're testing not if, a time machine is possible to build. That's complicated. They are really testing if we built a time machine and it was this price and worked this way, how many people would want it? And so you can test that with a brochure, some photos, a rendering, a drawing at a whiteboard, basically. So, a rapid prototype doesn't take a lot. And if they're actually doing engineering, they're not doing Kickbox right. Or as I would always tell software programmers at Adobe, and there was always a big groan, like when there was 300 software engineers in a room in Delhi, India, and I said, there's no coding in the red box. They're like, but it's, look, how many times have you built something nobody wanted? And that sucks, so don't. Let's figure out if people want it before we build it and what to build. So what are you going to give people? Now, a lot of people freak out at you just put money in the box, anarchy, the world will end. And it's like, well, turns out it didn't. We did that as straight up crazy as you possibly could imagine for years across over 20,000 people. And no, Adobe employees are not more moral, ethical, upstanding. I gave it to them in the right way, which was, look, no tracing, no nothing. You could seal it. No way anyone will know. But please don't, because we're trying something bold and we believe in innovation. And turns out that was some people said that was the most impactful thing. But doing these prototyping things that I showed you is also a great way to do that. So in your organization, if you were to do Kickbox, because usually after sessions like this, of which I've done many around the world, people come up afterwards and they're always like, yeah, that was so great at Adobe, a crazy Silicon Valley company, but that would never work at my company because we're blah, blah, blah. some difference. And but it does work. It's worked from insurance companies to gymnasium companies to aircraft carrier makers, submarine makers. Like the craziest different, Caterpillar, the heavy equipment tractor maker. And Kickbox has worked in these organizations. And so with a little bit of adapting, it works great. And really don't adapt too much. So we strongly encourage trying to get as close to minimum friction as possible. Let your innovators innovate, because you're not giving them huge resources. So you should have lower limits. And that's a weird thing about a lot of orgs is, there are very correct price, spending controls. But when we're talking like $100, $200, like that's the toppings on a pizza at a meeting internally, that's nothing. And so do we really need to do 3 forms and check it and have somebody and find it like this? At some point, diminishing returns are just wasting money. So stop checking, stop deciding, just do it. If an employee thinks it's a good idea and we hired that employee, then we'll give them $1,000 to run with, see what they can do. Now, maybe they screw it up, but then guess we're not hiring the right people. And but we had enough successes that it was the most efficient money spend in all of our innovation efforts, despite it having 90-something% failure. But that was by design. So we want you to jump into a breakout real quickly. This one we'll just do at 5 minutes as well. We gave you a little extra time last time, but this one will be a hard 5. And we'd like you guys to discuss, if you were to do a Kickbox in your company, what would it, would you be able to just let people, in addition to anyone, do any idea? How would you handle, could we give credit card forms, expense forms, maybe trade some ideas and think about how to do that? Let's go and jump. We are back. Hope you had a good breakout session. And quickly now, we want to jump to, because we want to try to get as many of your questions. There's a lot of questions in the Q&A, and we're thrilled you guys are so engaged. So we're going to do quite a few of these questions. But we want to get to the third thing that's really key for you. And then we will share this new thing we're open sourcing today, which is a fantastic resource that you will get the URL for now. But first, question 3, who will pick the good ideas? And we put good ideas in quotes because obviously when they're new ideas, it's impossible to tell which ones are the good ones. Now, this seems counterintuitive. And when things are counterintuitive, you often get CEOs and other executives like, look, I know what our customers want and they don't want X, Y, Z. But oftentimes new ideas aren't being explained right. They're not being put in the right context. They haven't been shaped, much like the washing machine monitor idea that became an IoT platform for Swisscom. And there are many, many other similar examples. And so I, being a serial innovator, when my boss said, well, you be the judge, because we talked about this, and I was like, hell no, like I'll pick the wrong one. And so he's like, well, if you think you'll pick the wrong one, you're the best person I've ever seen at this. And I said, yeah, but I think I'll pick it's like not correct. He's like, what do we do? And I said, well, the answer is you have the customers pick. And he's like, what do you mean? You make a panel of customers? I'm like, no. You start doing a customer validation process that's rigorous. But when you start, it's just more like, okay, you have a vague idea, very little money, very little time, basically a napkin of an idea. Now, can you take and get an actual living, breathing customer interested in that idea? And so, the other approaches are, is it you? Is it your boss? Is it an executive jury? Is it external experts like VCs? I have companies ask me to do this. And I'm like, I don't think you want to do that, because what we want to do is teach people how to judge their own ideas. And it's not that hard, actually. yes, it's easy to fall in love with your own ideas, but once you get past that, it's really pretty clear, which ones are really going to go. And so the best way to do it, and the way we ended up doing it at Adobe, is you go get real feedback from real customers in the real world, like evidence, like not theory, but you actually ask people, and you have them on video, surveys. If I want to, can I call them, and talk to this person and come back and say, yes, I got this customer who wants this, this number we tested, and it's 4% of the people, that we tested via website test or something else, just the value proposition are positive, not the finished product, but before we started engineering the product. It was, if we engineer this product and it existed at this price, about like these features, would you buy it? And then we actually did sort of validation tests with those people. Then how do you judge that that's actually credible? Because different products, different companies, different markets will be different. And the way that we did that was, let's push it to the product managers. Adobe's in a bunch of different lines of business. And so I don't know all of them well enough. And so why don't I just get the business owner? So we tell our innovators, go talk to the business owner in the area. And sometimes, because we let anybody innovate, it was people in building services pitching some senior director they'd never met in another group. And so that was ultimately, who will pick the good ideas is like, develop a system that's, first of all, scalable. Because if you have 1,000 ideas, you can't have a judging committee with senior executives. I mean, they love it to be Shark Tank and be the executive, but it's not very productive. And it also, doesn't work, in my experience, any better than random. And so, instead of rolling dice, have them go talk to customers and then go raise real money from real people in the company. And the way we did it at Adobe, which once again, hardcore, the hardest way, was we gave no budget to the department heads. You had to go steal budget that they already had. It had to look so good, so compelling. And that was a high bar, and a bunch of projects got past it. But boy, we didn't make it easy. I mean, people were like, wow, Mark, you maliciously designed Kickbox to be savagely hard. And I was like, yeah, because good ideas can do that. And, the bad ones that just die anyway, because they seem cool, aren't worth it. And so let's do it this way. So I'm going to hard transition here to Dave, because he has something to share in the next 5 minutes. And then we're going to jump for the rest of our time into answering all of your questions rapid fire, and get some of you on camera too, and just, let you ask and beat us up and say, no, this can't possibly work. And then we'll tell you how it has worked. So Dave, share with us this cool new thing that your new company, Rready, is open sourcing, because you guys just developed this, and it's really awesome because now it's free and open source.
Cool. Have you share the screen? We see it's basically a coaching board we have developed last year. So basically, help kickboxers go through the virtual project of validating their idea, and it's basically a board where the kickboxers are working together with the coach. It's basically you walk to, it's like a 2-month, the red box around 2-month phase as well, like Mark mentioned earlier, 6 to 8 weeks for us as well, around 2 months. And during that time, you basically work your way through the whole process. And the process here is very much basically you start with your motivation, and you basically focus on the problem you're solving, and you walk your little figure through the whole thing while you, during your 2 months, you basically figure out the problem worth solving, how could a solution look like, the concept, and then the pitch to steal some money. During the whole phase, you get with your coach, you fill out basically this kind of canvas that's along the kickbox process. Like again, the problem, the solution, the way you want to steal money and bring your idea to the next level. You also try to have it be very actionable. So you basically create some commitment. I think it's always good to have time boxing, to have some commitment. So we put a little very lean canvas version in here. So from coaching checkpoint to coaching checkpoint, you have some things you define, and you get something to kind of to check as a coach if the kickboxer did some progress there. Another very important experience is actually writing down the idea, even though the idea doesn't really matter. The Kickbox to get some space to just write it down, to write down his big idea, and then you go to the problem. And also basically writes down why he's really motivated for his idea and what's his to get started. Then we also saw that the unboxing of the box is a very important moment, opening this box together. We try to replicate it here virtually. So basically you open the seal and you go through the different fields of the box, like the hour, the time you get, the sponsoring agreement. If you want to get to the next phase, you basically need to get a sponsor signing these agreements to give you budget to move on to the next phase. You also have this tokenized thing Mark mentioned earlier, is 1,000 coins you receive, which is equal 1,000 euros or dollars. With that money, you can basically then get access to different services, to marketeers, lawyers, and everything virtual now. Before we had that more personal with co-working spaces, but now it's fully virtual to get access to a whole kind of technologies and providers who help them to basically work on the idea. And that makes it really easy, basically. Again, we need to make it as easy as possible to get started and to start validating the idea, and to have as little excuse as possible not to do it and not to get things done. So what we did, we have this kind of workspace here, and below we have reference to the book. You can actually download that kind of this book with the process and some nice videos of Mark as well. And during that book, you have basically always have some referenced extra content people can access. Let's say it's all about the problem, and to try to define a persona, they can then get a template to start working on the persona. So you try to give them relevant content, but also give some space to work on the idea together with a coach, fully virtual. The second checkpoint is rather on the check-in to see where you're standing. So we try to have a little model here where you see where am I regarding problem, regarding target group, regarding POC, pitch, and so on. And you start to work on your weak spots where you still need to improve to be ready for your pitch going forward, which will be the third phase here, basically a pitch session where you structure your pitch. There will be a lot of kind of inspiration, how to do successful pitches, how to steal money in corporates, how to manipulate people, how you learn about the goals of the boss of your potential sponsor to get buy-in. All these little tricks we added here in this framework here, and that will be a way to really try to replicate the physical experience in a virtual way. And that's the example for the red box. I put before in the chat the link so you can have a look at it. There's also a version for the blue box. And I really believe if you can create this engagement, this interaction in a virtual space, you're not able to fully replicate the physical. It's kind of going along the physical part. It doesn't replicate, but it gives a good way to collaborate and to work on the idea and getting some inspiration. And at the end, it's all about being enabler, to providing the right learning components, the right access to experts, right access to potential partners at the right moment. And the innovator needs to do the work at the end. But we just provide everything the person might need.
So Dave, that's great. And I posted the link again in the chat. And so it's there, what Dave was just going through. So that's a tool called Pro. That's a site you can go to and zoom in, pan around basically those images. And that is the first sort of coaching session, kind of replacing an in-person workshop. Although we do recommend that you have physical material sent to people that they open at the same time, and you craft yours a little bit to go through the same way. And also, so there are Kickbox consulting companies, providers, and technology companies like now rready has an online platform. So they're open sourcing one of the tools they use, but you can go use that tool now. It's part of the free open source. If you want to hire them to deploy it, you can, of course, do that or hire their coaches and all the different services they offer. And so thanks to them for open sourcing that. So now let's go into the Q&A. And I'd like to invite anybody that wants to, who's willing to come on camera, because you have a question or one of these questions in here and the Q&A was yours. And we're going to go for the next 10 minutes, the final 10 minutes of the session. And I think Dave and I are available to run a little over if anybody else is. And so we'll try to get through all of these as quickly as possible. But raise your hand and if you're willing to jump in, and we will welcome you so that we can chat interactively, which is way more interesting. So the second question, we already answered the first one. Besides the money that is granted to research the idea of the red box, does the red box grant some hours for a person to invest? Yes. What I initially came up with as a trial with Kickbox was, it said, there was a note in there, it said, you need to negotiate 30 to 40 hours over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So it's like a little bit fuzzy and variable. And you need to gain the cooperation of your manager. And there were a few cases where, because this wasn't like a hard thing, where the CEO said, I will order people. And I said, no, let's not do that. Let's instead let them sort of work it out and negotiate it. So it's less disruptive. And in a few cases, I had people call me that were innovators that were having trouble with a manager who wasn't reasonable. I remember Sammy was one of the first ones who was in Germany. And he, his manager was just really giving him a hard time about getting any time to kind of work on the project after sort of agreeing to let him do it. And, I just called and talked to Frank and said, on your KPI, your key performance indicator, against supporting innovation this year. So when you review with your manager, how are you doing? This is what you have to report, is how encouraging innovation. And, that helped him see the light a little bit. And then I worked with Sammy to sort of like, maybe you just need to push it out a few weeks so you get this one deadline done. And so it's teaching them how to work it out and slipstream it into the flow. I like that. Other orgs have gone the other way. So Dave, next question you could take.
I think what criteria do you use as a filter to determine the priorities of these ideas and successfully lead to go-to-market? We have touched on that. That's basically the radical approach that you steal budget, that you have this, we use the sponsoring agreement I've shown before, where you basically try to get a sponsor on board who's actually investing his existing budget in your idea. Just see if I can find here. That's the sponsoring agreement. So basically it's kind of you do fundraising within your company. And if you successfully get funding for your idea, you move on. What you also have done is like defining specific areas. At Swisscom, we had a 5G campaign, we had a privacy campaign, a future HR campaign, and we partnered up with that business unit, and we specifically searched ideas in that field. We did that beside, we never stopped the opportunistic ongoing idea collection, but if you run such a more specific one, you might get a set of more specific ideas. We did one around sales and service, and we had 25 ideas, where 6, I think, got implemented, from returning old hardware to kind of services to increase your Wi-Fi router and stuff like that. And all these ideas came from the front. So I believe if you run these more specific idea campaigns, you by default have already some priority done, and usually have all the key decision makers, the guys with the budget there, and have their awareness, and it's a higher chance of getting funding for boxes. But still, at the end, it's the market. It's data beats opinion. That's what I'm a strong believer in. It's all about really the customer, and the market decides based on data.
Great. So the next question is, how fast is the prototyping? Is there any iteration process? I already answered this one, so we could just, I think, skip over it. But it's very fast. It's minimal cost, and you iterate as much as necessary. Sorry, for that product. How do you handle intellectual property?
I can take that one. We can take a break, Mark.
No, I'm good. Okay. Let's keep going because it got 2 minutes. So how do you handle intellectual property if an individual has a great idea that would be ceded to the company? In the US at Adobe, every employee signs a proprietary rights agreement. That's the nature of working in a technology. Even if you're a janitor in a technology company, if you develop something and you use any company time at all, any company resources at all, or any company knowledge at all, the company owns it. And that's the company's opening legal position. Legally, it may, I asked our general counsel once, just curious for me, this question when I started working there, and that's the standard answer. And that was the answer. It may be fuzzy on some edges, but that's where I always start with people. It's like, look, if you want to do a startup and you want to create the next Facebook and you want to own it, hey, let's go have a beer. I'll tell you how great it is. I'll tell you what it's like to be bankrupt. I've been there. Homelessness, super fun. And but now you work at this big company and there's a set of trade-offs. And one of those trade-offs is, yes, if you invent the next Photoshop, you might get some bonuses and some great stock options, but you're not going to get to keep half the money. That's just the deal. And if you want to say the deal on the other side of the fence is, the grass is greener, we could talk about that, but I don't think you're quite appreciating everything that comes with the other side. And, but I just tell people, let's go and talk about it. Like, I'm happy to talk about that. I'll try to convince you to go be a startup entrepreneur all day long. Most people are at a big company because they want to be at a big company. And this is a way for them to have a little company experience for part of their time in the big company. Next question, Dave, if you want to take it.
Well, just one thing to add to the last one. We actually have this agreement that if a project is not core to the company, to Swisscom in that example, then you can leave at any time, and your startup, and Swisscom gets an 8% option kind of for the incubation. So we basically built that spin out component into the program, because I strongly believe if something is not core business, you rather need to spin out of the company, the earlier the better. That's what happened to us with Ready. We realized it's not core for Swisscom, so we decided to spin it out and become an independent company. So next question, what are pros and cons and changes in running Kickbox digitally? I think really you lose this kind of personal touch. It's a risk if you have if you do workshops and events together and you have personal coaching, it can never be replicated by digital. I believe it's at the end of that part. On the other hand, you have a lot of kind of people working in home offices as well. That was actually always a good experience. They have a lot of time and they love to work on their idea, maybe beside work, in the morning, in the evening. It opens up new opportunities to work on a Kickbox project with virtually, remotely. You can form teams without boundaries. Working with global companies now, they really form teams around the globe, but that's actually where the platform as well plays a good role. So there are challenges on the energy side, so maybe you have to run some virtual events, try to keep that vibe up, have the good coaches that inspire innovators, that kind of stuff. But still, I see also clear advantages of scalability and really being truly global. Yeah.
Yep. And so the next question, thanks, Dave, is did you make a lot of communication, let people know they could all volunteer? Hell yes. I went in every venue, including like standing out in the lunch area, handing out things. I know at Swisscom, you guys did like hot sauces in the lunchrooms labeled with your Kickbox program, and other people have done all this kind of stuff. At Adobe, we have, LCDs in the elevators. And we had those with our signage rotating all the time saying, come to Kickbox. In our company meetings, the CEO talking about it, featuring projects and everything. So obviously we were the company that invented Kickbox in 2012. And so it was a huge focus. And I swear to the day I retired, a couple years ago, I had people at Adobe call me up, like on my phone from the employee directory. Hi, so, I've been working here at Adobe for about 20 years. And I just heard, I was reading Fortune magazine and they gave some award to Adobe for Kickbox. What is Kickbox? I've never heard of it. I swear, like I did everything to communicate, employee newsletter, so you cannot communicate enough. And it's, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to promote it everywhere. Everybody will be taking free $1,000 boxes or whatever. Well, I tried to get too many people to take it. Never, ever happened at Adobe. So there are other gating factors. And so promote as much as you can, remove all the friction you can. And if you get too much uptake, which I predict will not happen, then you can dial it back. But don't start by gating it because you are going to be surprised. Dave.
Yeah, what type of organizational culture and mindset are needed to successfully implement Kickbox? And what's the impact? I believe the impact is really a big impact on the culture. This radical bottom-up approach makes kind of also more senior leaders more approachable. We have Kickboxers writing directly to the top management to get their attention, and they actually did get attention. So I believe it does have a good impact on culture, on the educational part of it as well. People get kind of lose fear of failure. They start things. They learn to pitch. All these kind of things are really beneficial. What does the org need? Actually, now working with 23 different orgs from very kind of traditional conservative companies to digital companies. It really works across many orgs. Mark mentioned earlier, Caterpillar, MasterCard. There's so many organizations who implemented it. At the end, I really believe that it works for any org. And also what I've seen, if you have top management support, that helps a lot. It's a very radical bottom-up program. And if you know you somehow top management is covering your back, that actually helps a lot. And we also used like top management endorsement somehow internally to launch the program, like head of HR giving time of people, innovation head and CEO endorsing it. That helps a lot and also creates credibility and has a big cultural impact in the org.
Yeah, in fact, when Southern California did a huge survey or a study, one of these HBR-like case study that students still study in universities now about Kickbox and implementing Kickbox. They came and studied what we were doing, and they said, and I kind of love this, was that Kickbox is clearly a culture change program disguised as an innovation program. And the answer is you have to do both. Well, of course it is. Like, I didn't start with that in mind, but that's the way we ended up. And then I'll just take a next question here real quick. And I saw Molly jumped in, so happy to take your question too. If you want to pop back in on camera. Did you think of allocating budget for hiring an intern? So at Adobe, after a while, people started, because you had to schedule interns at Adobe like 6 months in advance to get them, recruited and all that stuff. People started bringing in interns because they're encouraged to do so, just to do Kickbox, which I think is a great idea. But what's different about this is instead of having an intern do an employee's idea, they just said, hey, intern, figure out an idea and spend your internship doing it, or part of your internship doing this. And that turned out to work pretty well. They're pretty interesting ideas. There were also interns that got involved on idea teams because they were kind of extra resources that could drift around. I would worry a little bit about if you have people, you can either just pay people, and I guess at Adobe interns are paid and quite well. And so you could pay people to work on an idea, but initially an early idea, like sort of the founder level people involved in a concept are kind of believers in the idea. And so I'm reluctant, and beyond just hiring a designer or somebody to 3D model something for you or whatever, I'm reluctant to get like somebody on the team driving a part of the idea who doesn't really care about it like that or doesn't get it, And so I would just be cautious about that. But I think it's a great question. And then I think the last question we didn't cover something in here about rready specifically. Yeah. So Dave, I don't know the answer to that, but maybe you do.
If rready can be integrated to Microsoft Teams, for example, I think you can also combine, like use Microsoft Teams for some communication parts. But I think at the end, what rready is offering is rather a platform where you can basically kind of a Kickstarter.com for innovation. So you basically are able to run the program in your company, give all employees the chance to validate ideas, bring experts to the platform, access kind of service providers, even share with other organizations. And all these things are somehow an own innovation platform, but communication can happen in team. So we can have a chat on that. Feel free to reach out.
Hey, Molly, I just saw your note in chat. I'd love to hear about version. That sounds really great. I always love to hear about success stories. And there are many, which I think is awesome. So if you could, if you want to share a little bit about that, that'd be great. Tell us what you've done and how it's going.
Sure. So we are now in year 4 of implementing a derivative of Adobe Kickbox that includes many of the Kickbox innovations, along with other lean experimentation and what we call cooperative extension community development best practices. So I work in a foundation that supports universities that have what's called cooperative extension units, work with their community members on some of the toughest issues facing communities. So the most recent example of that is working with teams that are working in and with their communities to have vaccine uptake in rural communities throughout the U.S. and its territories. So we had been going around traveling to different university and community settings throughout the U.S. And I think the largest group we did, we call it an innovation skill building experience. The largest group that we did it with was about 600 people, and in North Dakota. And we felt that we needed to go online. And again, pre-pandemic, we are a completely virtual organization, so we're very used to working this way, just as a day-to-day. But we incorporated Zoom. We created, we tried all different, pilots of 2 hours synchronous, 3 times a week with coaching. We've also, we have 150 facilitators that are trained throughout. So we do the training virtually, then they help coach these and present these sessions. So
Hey,
it's
Molly,
over Zoom. Yeah.
Can I just I'm going to jump in really quick and just comment on this sounds awesome, and a fantastic program. And it sounds like you're doing great work. But the interesting thing that I'm pulling out of this is that, first of all, you crafted your own program based on Kickbox, the open source and the existing tools and things that are there. And that is generally what we always suggest. That was like, in open sourcing it is like, yes, you should adapt it, please. And I always beg people, do not do Adobe's Kickbox in your organization, or exactly Swisscom's Quickbox or Kickbox, or any of the many other orgs that have shared their Kickboxes, but adapt it for your own organizational needs, contexts, etc., and then share back that as well. But you'll find that you have a more dynamic and a better and more adaptable program. And so, Molly, do you have a specific question today, or do you just want to
I
share what you're
didn't.
doing?
I actually, someone pinged me from the roundtable and said to share.
Okay.
So
Great.
it was not a specific question, but I did
just
want
wanted
to
make
mention
sure that I didn't miss, because sometimes I do, that I didn't miss a question. And so, no, it sounds like, congratulations. That's fantastic work, and
Awesome.
that you're doing that. And so if there are any other questions, please post them in the Q&A. But I think we will, and thank you, Molly, for sharing that. Dave, anything to wrap up?
I think it was an awesome session. Thanks for your engagement, your questions. I hope it was interesting. You learned something, and you had good discussions in your roundtables. And it would be great. I'm looking forward to see many cool projects emerging in all your organizations and new programs.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Signing off.